Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. This week's video is something special. Fate Extra Last Encore, now fully complete, is what I consider to be a bit of a train wreck. Nasu apparently intended Last Encore to work as a fun starting point for newcomers to Fate Extra, while simultaneously giving something new to those already familiar with the game. Which leads me to the most basic question. What is Last Encore? Well, it's a 13-episode anime created by Studio Shaft, the studio behind hits such as the Monogatari series and F, A Tale of Memories and Melodies. The story is a pseudo-sequel to the original Fate Extra video game released on the PlayStation Portable. Specifically, it's a what-if scenario, told to its fullest. It is my goal in this video to convey to you the anime's tumultuous narrative in a way that actually makes sense, so we can look back at the story and finally see its merits beyond a mountain of lore without substance, in nauseating exposition dumps that still fail to clear things up. That's because there are some truly beautiful moments in the anime that are worth watching, but can only truly shine once the full story is revealed. Without further ado, let's dive in. To start things off, I'm going to lead with an overview analysis, basically zooming out to see the big picture. To do that, I've got to recap a bit of Fate Extra, since it's absolutely integral to understanding Last Encore. After all, this anime, unlike the game, does not take time to develop all the key players, the masters and servants, like you'd expect from a well-written Fate work. It relies off the assumption that you're already familiar with the characters. I'll only be giving a brief synopsis here, so if you want a more thorough explanation, you can check out a previous video of mine that dives much deeper into the lore of Fate Extra proper. You can find it in the description or the card right above me. The easiest way to describe Fate Extra is to think of it as the digital science fiction equivalent of Fate Stay Night. Humanity progresses on Earth much the same, creating heroes and legends, but shit takes a turn for the worst when mana drastically depletes on the planet, causing human society to fall apart. The modern era of mages that we see in Fate Stay Night never really comes about, while Stay Night has Akasha, the root of all existence, which records all of the universe and its events in the Akashic records. In Fate Extra, that whole bit is replaced by the Moon Cell, an ancient, highly advanced supercomputer on the moon that's been around for billions of years. It's recorded all of human history as data, and can summon forth heroes, much like the Throne of Heroes, through its protocol, the Moon Cell Automaton. Instead of having modern mages, we instead have Spiritron hackers who project themselves into the Moon Cell to try and harness its power, just like how mages pursued the Holy Grail. Since the Earth itself is a wreck, the Moon Cell has a fully digital environment, kinda like the Matrix, called Seraph. Within Seraph, humans can pretty much live on in the form of digital avatars called cyberframes. In addition, the Moon Cell itself fills Seraph with unconscious programs, NPCs, modeled after the many humans it recorded on Earth. Regardless, its data was incomplete, and to get a clearer perspective on mankind and their nature, the Moon Cell allowed the Spiritron hackers in. At some point, enough of them managed to access the Moon Cell that it decided to hold a competition to attain its power. These tournaments are known as the Moon Cell Holy Grail Wars. 128 hackers are chosen at a time, chosen as masters, paired with heroic spirit servants, and forced to fight it out in an organized tournament. And the winner would reach the Angelica Cage, the Moon Cell core, where they can have their wishes granted by the alien supercomputer. Sounds pretty badass. Now, I mentioned NPCs. Normally, they're supposed to be based off of once living humans on Earth, but in rare instances, an NPC's AI can gain self-awareness and its own free will. This is what happens with our antagonist, Twice H. Peaceman. He died on Earth as a casualty of human warfare, and his recorded data was used in Seraph. In an anomaly, he gains awareness and actually participates in the Holy Grail War. After many failed attempts, he forms a contract with the Saver Servant Buddha and manages to finally make his way to the Angelica Cage. Sadly, since he's just an AI, he isn't able to enter the Moon Cell core without being deleted. All that work and he still can't get his wish granted. So instead, he hangs out around the finish line, waiting for other masters from later Grail Wars to show up. He asks them to fulfill his wish, and if they refuse, he fights and kills them. This goes on for quite some time. Eventually, the main character, an AI named Hakuno Kishinami, also gains self-awareness and winds up joining the next Grail War. In Last Encore, this Hakuno is presented as the female version, and her servant in the war is the saber class Nero Claudius. The two work their way through the tournament and encounter Twice H Peaceman just outside the Angelica cage as their final boss. In the Fate Extra video game, you wind up defeating Twice in this battle, emerging victorious. Branching from all I've just said, Last Encore serves to tell the story of what happens in the event that Hakuno and Nero lose their fight against Twice and Buddha. Next, we need to understand more about the enemy, Twice H Peaceman. In life, he was a scientist, a researcher whose work helped save lives, even in the face of humanity's incessant need to kill each other in war. He himself was killed while serving as a medic on the front lines. After this kind of suffering, he ultimately reasoned that humanity's true nature was warfare itself. This is all the more clear when he himself trampled over others in the Grail War in a futile effort to grant his perpetuation of war. Using war as a means to an end, regardless of what that end entails, is what Twice reasons is the entire purpose of humanity. He tries to get Hakuno to agree with his idea and get her to grant his wish, but even she, another AI who managed to gain consciousness, rejects him. Let's talk about Buddha real quick. The reason Saver defeats Nero on this timeline is because he invokes his noble phantasm, called Chakravartin, Turner of the Wheel. It manifests as two gigantic golden wheels rotating in the sky. It shoots arrows of light, and it's because of this mobile artillery platform that Hakuno and Nero are killed. In Last Encore, Twice has achieved victory yet again, but then what? He's still stuck there all alone right at the finish line. Over time, his goal changes. If the Masters and Seraph won't succeed him, he'll just seal off Seraph entirely so mankind can't have a future in the Moon Cell. Basically, he says fuck it, accessing the Moon Cell core even though it'll delete him in the process. He seals off Seraph at the expense of his existence. Buddha vanishes at this point, leaving Chakravartin, which, over a very long time, will fully power itself and destroy Seraph entirely. There are definitely some consequences to sealing off Seraph. For one, even if someone dies in the Moon Cell, their cyberframe is constructed of different aspects. Just because someone's body dies, it doesn't mean their mind dies. One of the nifty things Seraph did for the people was purify their minds. It would clear away all the regrets and grudges of those who died in the Moon Cell. Now that Seraph is sealed away, people who die in the Moon Cell have their minds linger in despair, occasionally gathering together to create an entity known as a dead face. One of the dead faces that gets born from human hatred winds up taking the form of Twice H Peaceman. This dead face looks like him, but it's technically a new individual sharing his traits. Instead, it appears that the Twice deleted by the Moon Cell now lingers as a Spiritron ghost, given that we see him appear in front of our protagonist occasionally. Another consequence of this whole ordeal is that Chakravartin takes over the Moon Cell Grail War, drastically changing its rules into what we see in the anime. For one, the masters and servants who died in the Grail War are brought back, practically undoing the consequences of the game. They're all gathered at Tsukumihara Academy and participate in the preliminaries. The Grail War, like before, will have 128 masters, but to be chosen as a candidate, one must realize their situation and kill another of their peers. This is what happens when we see Leo playing chess with another student, with the loser being stabbed to death. Among the contenders is our protagonist, one of the most poorly written characters in the franchise. He is born as a dead face, just like the new Twice H Peaceman, so he's a very angsty boy, born of the regret of dead folks and such. Mostly though, it seems he's a reincarnation of Hakuno Kishinami, only now a guy, which is probably a design choice meant to satisfy fans of both genders. Despite that, he doesn't really know his name or anything. Yet for some reason, he's back to his status quo friendship with Shinji Mato. Remember, this Shinji's not the same guy from Stay Night. Rather than a rapist sister slammer, he's not even related to Sakura and is instead a hardcore gamer and hacker. He's even got a girlfriend who literally does nothing of value in the entire anime. I like how people say that extra Shinji isn't a douchebag like he is in Stay Night, but But when push comes to shove and it's time to finalize the remaining servants for the war, he turns on Hakuno and stabs his ass to death. So much for that. Once 128 masters are selected, the rest of the people hanging around are killed off by effigies, servants summoned just to purge the remaining unchosen masters. At the basement of the academy, the bottommost floor of the entire Grail War, is a pit called the Rose Garden of Limbus, sometimes referred to as Limbo. In addition to being a virtual dumping ground for corrupt data to be deleted, it also reflects the internal landscape of those who peer into its void. Hakuno, being a dead face, doesn't exactly die when Shinji murders him. Instead, Hakuno finds himself in Limbo, being attacked by Nameless as an effigy. He falls to the deepest depths of Limbo, where Nero perished upon her defeat by Buddha. Her sword remains, waiting for one with a will to live to claim it. Hakuno crawls to and draws the sword, summoning Nero in the process, becoming an unofficial 129th master. Hakuno and Nero must now rise to the top of the tower, defeating the floor masters on each one, all for the chance to face twice once more. We've also got a confusing bit with the AI overseer, Kirei Kotomine, claiming that getting Hakuno into this Grail War was his final task before vanishing. Just what the hell did he do? There's one major twist though. Somehow, between Hakuno summoning Saber and the two of them actually arriving at the first floor, 1,000 years have already passed. Yes, a 1,000-year time interval passes, during which the initial 128 masters fight each other to rise the ranks. For this new iteration of the Grail War, rather than having 7 days before paired combatants have to kill each other, their masters are allowed to take their time. Regardless, a master is only able to advance by defeating one of their competitors on the same floor. Thus, to win, all you need to do is defeat 7 other masters, one for each floor. Of course, just like before, dead-faced Twice Peaceman is still waiting at the top, killing all the masters that reach him. 1,000 years, holy crap. Fairly early on, the Grail War system elects one master from each floor to become a floor master. In Shinji's case, he becomes a master by being the last participant alive on floor 1. Rather than ascending to more difficult fights, he fears death and also fears having to kill anyone else. Thus, he uses his authority as a floor master to rebuild it into a lavish city for other masters to bail out of the fight and live peacefully. Because of this, the Grail War grows stagnant, with masters refusing to fight and simply live among the lowest floor, unaware that humanity's last home is fated to be destroyed. Conveniently, the rest of the floor masters wind up being the other masters encountered in the video game. Each one of these floor masters customizes their floor to fit their needs. Meanwhile, the already dying planet of Earth falls to total ruin, with the only remaining humans being those still inside the moon cell. Admittedly, so much of this is completely unnecessary. It's filled with complications and semantic details, while intentionally steering clear of actually developing characters and their actual conflicts. The idea of rising floor by floor, taking out the same master and servants encountered in the game, seems perfectly acceptable. But without the thrill of investigating and learning the identities of the servants, it just isn't as compelling. Not to mention Hakuno being a dead face and ranting about hatred like a distraught emo edgelord doesn't make any sense or have any narrative weight until at least 8 episodes in, which is a bit too late to start giving a crap. The biggest problem is we don't get a sense of stakes, other than simply winning the war for its own sake. Our protagonist doesn't even develop strong goals and aspirations until deep into the story. The rules are inconsistent. Some defeated masters don't die like they should, and what allows a servant to win over another sometimes just falls into the territory of shonen willpower. Sure, Nasu loves to make rules and then break them, but we don't have a solid foundation to understand which rules are being broken and why. In other words, you can't break what you haven't established. Given the success of Ufotable's adaptations, it probably would have been better just to adapt the vanilla PSP game. Anyway, that's the full premise of Last Encore, without any of the mystery and confusion. To continue, I'll be commenting on each floor in the anime, and how their interactions tie into everything I've just said. So, the first floor, I already mentioned its floor master is Shinji, who, after stabbing his best friend, caves under the guild and serves as mayor to a peaceful haven for the other mages. To reside in his city, he has other masters sell off their servants. After After waking from essentially a 1,000-year slumber, Nero and Hakuno reach floor 1 and meet up with Shinji's servant, Francis Drake, who explains just how different this floor is from other Grail Wars. In the end, they meet Shinji, refuse his offer to sell Saber, and fight against him and Drake. Sadly, we have very little time to actually learn about Francis Drake and her bond with Shinji, and the fight is over fairly quickly. I guess one thing the games don't really reveal is that Nero, being an empress, has the imperial privilege skill that lets her take control of different vessels, giving her the chance to get in close and deliver a winning strike. Hakuno and his servant win, taking the chance to ride the elevator to the next floor. As they leave, the floor falls apart, and all of the surviving residents of the city are revealed to have been mere NPCs. From a distance, the two are being monitored by Rin Tosaka, who actually has a very important reason for helping Hakuno out. More on that later. For now, it's interesting to note that Rin and later Rani VIII are able to fight as pseudo-servants. Instead of using their servants outright, namely Ku Hoen and Lu Bu, they instead take on their forms for combat. When they reach the second floor, they encounter its master, Dan Blackmore, and his servant, Robin Hood. Instead of being killed off by the Moon Cell, the two find themselves in charge of the second floor, where they proceed to hunt down the other masters who enter their territory. They're probably a major reason why so many masters decided to stay on floor 1 where it was safe. Hakuno and Nero have a failed first encounter, being lured into the forest, where Robin Hood gets the upper hand. The two are rescued by Rani VIII. She's just like Rin, choosing to help them for a specific purpose. Again, I'll get back to that. Rani heals Nero and explains to Hakuno that this particular war has been going on for 1,000 years. With Rani's help, Hakuno and Nero once again battle Dan Blackmore and Robin Hood. Nero counteracts the poison of Robin's Yu Bao by intentionally bleeding out, while Hakuno first awakens to his mysterious abilities as a dead face. With that, they succeed and are permitted to ascend to floor 3. The next bit's crazy. For the third floor, Hakuno and Nero have to overcome the floor master Alice and her servant, Nursery Rhyme. Of course, Alice was a poor girl who was experimented on as a child, before dying and surviving in the Moon Cell as a Spiritron ghost. By being selected as a floor master, she's stuck being all alone for 1,000 years. When Hakuno's group arrives, they have to traverse the Nameless Forest, a labyrinth projected by Nursery Rhyme based on Alice in Wonderland. Alice's feelings, out of control, result in the summoning of the monster, Jabberwock, which slaughters the other masters it finds. When Nero fights it, Nursery Rhyme uses its noble phantasm, the Queen's Glass Game, perpetual engine made in Empire, to restart the story, sending Hakuno and company back to the entrance. During their time on the third floor, Hakuno plays with Alice, and by having Nero finally defeat the Jabberwock, she is finally free from being trapped as a floor master. In thanks, as a parting gift for Hakuno, she gives him a bookmark contained in Nursery Rhyme, which turns out to be a one-time use of the Queen's Glass Game. On a side note, Hakuno's group encounters Shinji's girlfriend, Misao Amari, or at least the memories of her. This was apparently as far as she got in the Grail War, and Hakuno gets to hear her tragic story. Even though we never see or hear from her again, it feels like they had grander plans for this character, but just didn't have the screen time to do anything with her. One thing that's bullshit is that we never get to see what happens on the fourth floor. The anime skips it, claiming it was an easy battle. So instead, we're left to talk about the fifth floor, whose master is Julius Harway. Julius just so happens to also be a dead face, given everyone he's killed both in and outside the Moon Cell. Hakuno, Nero, and Rin struggle to defeat them, and are only able to survive when Rani chases them off. While unconscious, Hakuno learns about Nero's previous master, the female Hakuno, as well as Nero's backstory, her legend. Nero is able to purify Hakuno's doubts, acknowledging him as an individual she loyally fights beside. He is able to accept himself and see himself as worthy, despite being an amalgamation of hatred. With a strong resolve to win, Hakuno and Nero once again take to their opponents and manage to succeed. Between floors, Hakuno discovers that, as a dead face, he has inherited the various code casts of people who died in the Moon Cell. In addition to his angry rage form, he can do cool stuff like enhance his body, make copies of himself, etc. The sixth floor is a total oddball. After being selected as masters during the preliminaries, both Rin and Rani fought their way to the 6th round, forced to battle each other in order to proceed. As it turns out, the two were equally matched, causing the Moon Cell to declare both of them masters of the 6th floor. Their cyber frames are stored in stasis, while their abilities as floor masters let them continue to fight each other using projected clones of themselves. Dozens of copies of Rin and Rani continue to fight for the remainder of the 1,000-year time gap. The two girls know they aren't going to be able to defeat one another, so they decide to do their best to help a third master reach the 6th floor and kill one of them, ending the cycle. Rin and Rani each create another clone, both being smarter and stronger than their basic soldier forms. These two clones, or rather copies, just so happen to be the same Rin and Rani that have been guiding Hakuno this whole time. When Hakuno arrives, they're attacked by all the copies of Rin and Rani, but once they reach the center of the floor, Hakuno finds two coffins, each containing Rin and Rani's slumbering bodies. He is told that, in order to reach the 7th floor, he has to kill one or the other. Instead of eliminating one of them, Hakuno tries to bypass the system with codecasts, choosing to try and save both of them. He succeeds in awakening Rin, but fails to prevent Rani from dying because of her particular cybernetic body that prevents the codecast from working on her. Thus, Rani is killed off, but is fine with it if it helps Hakuno break this corrupt Grail War. By now, Hakuno has finally established that his main goal is to return the Moon Cell to its former state, to restore Seraph. Hakuno brings this conviction along when confronting Leo on the 7th floor. In the original Grail War, Leo was defeated by the female Hakuno, but before his body faded away in a blaze of fire, Twice Peaceman saved him and actually convinced him to give up on humanity's future. In a sense, they became partners. In this newest Grail War, they fight their way to the 7th floor and intentionally guard it to prevent mages from proceeding to face Twice as their final opponent. He has his servant, Gawain, keep watch over the floor while he rests for hundreds of years. Hakuno and Nero take them on, but are clearly outmatched despite their effort. They are defeated and sent plummeting back down all the way to Limbo, where they first met. Worse, they are told that Chakravartin will activate and destroy Seraph in only a matter of hours. They fear there's no way to get back to the 7th floor in time, but Hakuno has a plan. The bookmark he got from Alice has the power to reset himself and Nero to a previous moment in time. They use it to immediately rejoin the battle and barely manage to claim victory against Leo and Gawain. Now, throughout the anime, it's quite beautiful how Nero is so honest and upfront about her love for Hakuno, both male and female, dead face or otherwise. The last encounter is pretty straightforward. They reach the top floor and confront Death-Face Peaceman, who of course wants humanity to fall, so he keeps commanding Chakravartin to attack with its beams. Leo, who declared himself a bystander, suddenly changes his mind and uses a codecast to protect the group long enough to formulate a plan. Leo will repel Twice. Nero will halt the turning of Chakravartin long enough to remove the barrier sealing the Moon Cell core, and Hakuno will infiltrate the core and force it to perform a system reset, undoing the sealing. Leo has Gawain blast Twice with his Excalibur Galatine, giving Nero the chance to stab her sword into the turning wheels, and after exhausting her spirit origin, enduring blasts from the wheel, she is able to halt it. Breaking the plan, though, Hakuno instead sends Rin to the core, so he can be with Nero in her final moments. It's absolutely sweet, but now that the barrier has reformed, Nero hands Hakuno her sword, and he charges through Twice, ignoring him completely, in order to stab the barrier and destroy it for good. Then we have the ending. Hakuno meets Rin in the Moon Cell core, and he decides to reset it and then make his wish. He wishes for a new world where humanity can have a future. Essentially, he entrusts the future to Rin before being deleted in the reset. We get a vague conclusion, with Rin running out across the newly formed world before her. Of course, the Rin Tosaka in Fate Extra isn't the same girl as you see in Stay Night. Her real body has blonde hair, which leads people to think the Moon Cell is actually restoring the destroyed Earth. I'm inclined to believe this as well, and this ending is similar to how Rin returns to her body on Earth at the end of the game. It's nice, but a little falling action never hurt anybody. It's not exactly clear who else is alive in this new world. In the game, Hakuno's AI was based off a real human who was frozen, waiting for advancements in medicine. It's possible Rin could be running to go see that body. For now, I'm left to speculate. Thankfully, it gives us more closure than the end of Evangelion anyway. At the end of the day, I found myself liking Last Encore a lot more than I initially did. After putting in the research and grasping an idea of the big picture, the events finally fell into place, and I could see them for what they were intended to be. Unfortunately, by intentionally being confusing and screwball with the narrative, we're stuck learning key pieces of the plot far too late into the narrative, wasting plenty of episodes that would have benefited severely from that development. Nasu apologized for the anime being too confusing, but claimed he wanted us to pay attention. Sadly, it's thinking too hard about a puzzle when they haven't given us all the pieces that made this such a mess. It is my hope that, by watching this video, you'll be able to go back and watch Last Encore to finally get the most out of it, like I did. I truly believe that with this video, and the original Fate Extra as prerequisites, this anime actually moves from a flawed one to a great one. But by itself, it could never achieve that much. For now, let us bask in the beauty that is Rin Tosaka and the glorious Also, the anime is dubbed in English on Netflix, and I also found that a fun way to enjoy the series. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe to OtakuDaiKun for more anime lists, reviews, discussions, lore videos, live streams, and the Holy Waifu Wars. If you're interested in seeing this channel grow, please consider becoming a patron or donating in a super chat during any of my weekly live streams. Also, feel free to check the description for my social media profiles, including an ever-growing Discord full of fans of anime and the Fate series. Until next time, celebrate your fandom!